It's time to start the conversation. It's 4:20. THC Live starts now. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're watching us. Welcome to THC Live. It is Thursday once again. We come to you every Thursday at 4:20 Pacific time. A jam-packed show once again. Before we get any further, you might notice that usually we have two chairs here. Our co-host Nikita Graham, I'd like to say away on assignment. Let's just say away. If that looks like an assignment, you can be your own judge. She is in lovely Paris. Apparently she just got there yesterday, but found time to hold a modeling shoot. It looks like she's having a good time. We'll check in with her. Is she going to be back next week, or is she still in Paris? She'll be back. Just a quick jaunt to Paris. She lives an amazing lifestyle. Last week she was cruising around Toronto. This week she's in Paris. We look forward to hearing from her when she returns. She's been there like 12 hours. She's already been in like 4 or 5 different places. She leads a good life, that Nikita Graham. She'll be back in studio with us next week. As always, you can watch us as you are right now on Facebook Live. You can also watch us on YouTube. If you have any questions or comments during the show, you can send them through our Facebook page and we will pass them on to our guests. Speaking of which, on the show today, Dr. Katherine Kramer is going to join us. She's a veterinarian with the Vancouver Animal Wellness Center. And about 5 years ago, she discovered the benefits of giving her patients, cats, dogs, whatever animals and pets she's dealing with, cannabis as a form of treatment, as medication, and the results have been far beyond her belief. She's going to join us via Skype. She's coming up momentarily. Also on the show today, we're going to be joined by Deepak Anand. And this guy's resume is second to none. Former executive director of the Canadian National Medical Marijuana Association. He submitted a policy paper and met extensively with the task force set up, of course, to study the legalization of cannabis in Canada. He's an adjunct professor at Kwantlen College, teaches an introduction to professional management of medical marijuana course. So lots to talk about with Deepak when he joins us a little bit later. He will join us live in studio. As we said, Dr. Katherine Kramer coming up. But first, as always, we look back at the history of cannabis in this country in a segment we like to call Growing Pains.
Following World War II, bans on cannabis and hemp production are reinstated across North America. That doesn't stop returning war veterans from introducing it into their communities. Before long, cannabis becomes popular everywhere, from nightclubs to college campuses.
You're a slacker.
In 1954, Canadian Prime Minister Louis St. Laurent passes new anti-drug laws. The penalty for selling cannabis doubles to 14 years. All cannabis medicine is banned.
This hot dog tastes weird.
And the pharmaceutical companies rejoice. Possession for the purpose of trafficking becomes a new offense. In order to avoid automatic conviction, the accused must prove that they were not selling or even sharing their cannabis. Due to the growing popularity of cannabis, hearings are held on Canadian TV in 1955. Canadian senators hear mainly from law enforcement officials. Those advocating medical or other approaches to cannabis are dismissed as misguided. In 1958, a study divides cannabis users into 3 main groups: swingers, squares, and beats. Swingers are criminals and entertainers aged 30 to 45. Squares are upper middle class, educated professionals 35 to 50. Beats are newcomers, typically under 25. By the 1960s, the beat culture evolves into hippies. Jazz and big bands give way to the rock and roll invasion. And French and American involvement in Vietnam,
this is whole other country,
give birth to the peace movement. In Canada, the 1961 Narcotic Control Act eliminates whipping, but adds a mandatory minimum punishment of 7 years for growing or importing cannabis. Only treason and murder have more severe punishments. Really?
Eat less slackers!
From 1930 to 1946, there are just 25 convictions for cannabis possession in all of Canada. In 1962, there are 20 convictions. The number rises to 2,300 in 1968. Then, a breakthrough. On May 19, 1969, the United States Supreme Court strikes down the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act.
Yes!
But President Nixon
I'm not a crook.
won't let it go. He gets Congress to draft the Controlled Substances Act, which separates drugs into 5 tiers, or schedules. From least restricted, Schedule 5, to most restricted, Schedule 1, according to their harmfulness. What happens next will cost one man his dream job.
Always in education, Growing Pains. We bring you a different part of Canadian history as far as cannabis goes every week right here on THC Live. Now, as promised before we joined Growing Pains, joining us to talk more about cannabis and its medical use. And this is fascinating. I don't know if a lot of people even realize that you can use cannabis to treat your pets, depending on what their illness is. Joining us, as we said, from the Vancouver Animal Wellness Center, Dr. Katherine Kramer joins us via Skype. Dr. Kramer, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I'm always happy to talk about CBD.
Well, so let me ask you first, you've been a veterinarian a long time, when did you come across, when did you first realize that maybe cannabis was an option for some of your patients?
About 5 years ago, I had an elderly cat, about 18, with multiple issues, pancreatitis, arthritis, heart disease, kidney disease, you name it. And we're basically keeping this cat almost comatose on conventional pain medication to keep him comfortable. He was miserable. He wasn't eating. He was just, we were facing euthanasia. And the owner, fortunately, worked for one of the compassion societies and said, you know, I really would like to try CBD. And my response, I mean, I was glad he was open enough, because it has really changed the way I practice. My response was, I have no idea about this, but it's worth a shot because we don't have much to lose. And we experimented with the dose. We started slow, and within a few days, this cow was eating again. And within a week or so, we were able to start taking him off some of his harder medication. And lo and behold, this cat lived another 2 to 3 years, and like really good years, good quality. And after that, I was hooked, so to speak. You know, if it worked so well for this patient, what about this? What about that? And now, you know, here we are 5 years later. And I would say majority of my patients are on some form of CBD.
Before I get into what's going on now, I just want to go back to that 5 years. How surprised were you about the results that when you first dealt with it with that first cat?
From a scientific point of view, I was pretty well aware of the benefits that people have seen using it for different medical conditions. And I've always been open. I come from a music background. My husband is a musician, so it's not like it's a foreign substance.
Right.
But honestly, some of the cases that I've seen, I'm just bowled over. I mean, I've had a few cases where it's nothing short of a miracle.
What's been so you have that moment with that first cat, and I think we talked about it earlier. It's like a eureka moment. Wow, where else can I use this? Who else can I help? What was the reaction from, I wonder, pet owners when they would come in and you'd go, you know what, I think we should try? What was the owner's kind of reaction to you?
Well, in our hospital, we're an integrative practice, so we already play around with a lot of unusual therapies. I have an interest in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, so I do a lot of acupuncture. I do Western and Chinese herbs already. We offer homeopathy, we offer chiropractic therapy. So a lot of people are seeking us out anyway. We see a lot of patients where Western medicine has failed them. And so they're already seeking something unusual. I have had a few, chuckles, and it's like, oh, you want to get my dog high?
Right.
Like, no, we're not talking marijuana. It's a good educational point to say we're talking CBD. THC absolutely toxic in animals, and we've had a couple of problems with some of the dispensaries where THC products have been dispensed instead of our CBD, and we've had a couple of patients end up in emergency hospital, and some that came in and were thinking, it's time, we have to euthanize our pet, and it was no, they'd just gotten the wrong product. So
that's a really interesting point, because I think the first thing I heard when I said, oh, a veterinarian, they can give their animals, their patients CBDs, I said, isn't that dangerous? And it was like, no, you're confusing it. So there is a lot of confusion out there, isn't there?
There really is, and honestly, I'll be glad when we get to the point where I can have a product on my shelf and I can say, yes, I can recommend this, and here is a safe, quality, controlled product. At this point, the college's point of view is that this is experimental, it's illegal, and as a veterinarian, I'm not allowed to talk about it, I'm not allowed to prescribe it, and after 5 years, I'm just starting to chat with the college about what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not. As rampant as it is and widely available, I would say a majority of pet owners are already using these products and not telling their vets, which I'm always happy to talk, have a forum like this to say, if you're interested in it, please talk to your vet, because pet owners are going to be the ones that nudge the veterinary community into becoming more proactive about using CBD and doing the research that we need.
So, Dr. Kramer, for 5 years, have you been breaking the law every day?
Well, depends on who you ask, I suppose.
Yeah.
When people come to me, and I do have a lot of people that seek me out because word has gotten out that yes, I'm open to it, and we can chat about it. I tell people that yes, by my college rules, I'm not allowed to prescribe or recommend, and these are the side effects, these are the potential complications. And if you still want to use it, then I will tell you where to get it safely. I will tell you how to use it safely. And I will stand by that, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned side effects. I'm just curious, now that you've had 5 years in, I'm sure you're well aware of what the side effects are of the traditional painkillers and medications that you've been giving to the cats and dogs that come in. Did you notice a difference? There still must be some side effects with the use of cannabis?
No, there's side effects with everything.
Right.
One of the benefits of cannabis is that we typically don't see the harsh side effects that we see with narcotics, with opioids. There are a lot of pain relievers on the market for dogs with arthritis, but a lot of dogs can't tolerate those medications. With cannabis, we usually can see some lethargy. Some of the dogs and cats are pretty sleepy when we start, so we always start with a low dose. There have been a few that seem to be allergic to the hemp, which goes without saying. And occasionally I've had a few patients that actually seem very anxious or wired with it, and the great thing is we stop it and those side effects go away pretty quickly.
Does it work better in certain animals other than other animals? Like, is it better in cats than dogs, birds? Like, what kind of wide range use have you been able to kind of try?
Well, I've only tried it in dogs and cats, okay. Although I get calls weekly about ferrets and rabbits and horses and cows and sheep and everything. Looking back historically, cannabis was used at the turn of the century in large animal medicine as a pain reliever. As far as cases go, I see huge benefits in patients with seizures, with anxiety, with arthritis, and any type of chronic pain. Unfortunately, I do a lot of cancer work, supportive care, and geriatric palliative care. And it's, like I say, it's in some patients, it's been a miracle.
It's amazing, and as you say, you kind of, it was thrust upon you just because, you know, there's one patient that, you know, wasn't sure what to do next, running out of ideas, and that's funny the way that kind of opens the door for other things. Where do you see it? You must be relieved to some degree that legalization, decriminalization is coming. Where do you see things going?
I'm really relieved, and I'm very proud of the American Veterinary Medical Association, who is calling in the States to have cannabis rescheduled so it can be researched. The Colorado State Veterinary School has 2 cannabis research projects going on right now for dogs with arthritis and dogs with epilepsy. So I'm hoping that as more people, and again, you know, pet owners are usually the ones who drive this, by demanding, you know, an alternative, a safe alternative for, you know, medications that are, you know, that do have side effects and are harmful. And I think, you know, the more the word gets out, the more interest there is. You know, when I started talking about this 5 years ago, I would talk to anybody who would listen about it. And now I get calls weekly from all across North America, from vets and research institutions and, you know, people, pet owners, who are really concerned about, you know, they need an alternative. So, and everyone is more open about it. You know, years ago, I talked to a veterinary oncologist back east who was very interested, and I said, "You need to be vocal about this." And she said, "I can't. I have tenure. You know, I'm fortunate not to have to worry about that."
Right.
So, but more and more vets are interested in it, and, you know, more the people who make policy are interested in it. So I'm hoping by, you know, this time next year, I can have a product on my shelf that I can absolutely say, yes, I can prescribe this for your pet.
Doctor, I'm just going to get some questions from those folks that are watching us on Facebook. We'll get the lovely and talented Camille to bring them in. Let me ask you while I wait for the questions. Oh, here they come. What was the reaction at the beginning? Oh, thanks, Camille. From your colleagues. Did they were they open to it? As you said, you're talking to one from out east. Yes, they were open to it. Were others looking at you like, no, you're crazy, don't waste your time?
Well, I get a lot of that anyway because of the acupuncture and the herbs.
Right.
But you know, I see the cases that nobody else can fix. And I'm okay with that. I would say the majority of vets that I get a call from, it's very much like, okay, you know, away from the public, I do want to know about this, and let me, you know, tell me everything you want to know. Publicly, it's still, you know, no, we can't, don't even ask me about that.
Right.
And I've gotten tons of patients from other vets who say, you know, I'm going to send so-and-so to you because they want to use CBD and I don't want to touch it.
It's fascinating.
And it's fair enough.
Yeah, no, at least they're not stopping the patient. At least they're recommending and at least sending them on to you, referring them so the patient can get the kind of care they want. This question we got in from Sarah. She says, what methods are used to administer CBDs to animals?
Right now, the tinctures seem to be the most effective. In the States, there are actually some very good preparations out there, and I can certainly, I'm happy to name brands if that's wanted. In Canada, it's been really limited. We in Vancouver have been working with, you know, private dispensaries, and you can use tinctures. You can use some of the places will have capsules. I actually talked to someone recently who's working on a transdermal preparation, which I think is going to be great for cats.
It's amazing. Things are coming up that we didn't even think about, like just different uses and different treatments and different things that we could be using cannabis for that, you know, for most people, they just think about the issue of whether it's legal to smoke a joint or not. It's such a bigger question.
Oh, absolutely. It's, you know, it's a medical need. You know, there have been tons of studies on, you know, with people and lab animals, but not a lot on dogs and cats. But within the last 5 years, you know, the patients that I see, it's very, very rare that I have a patient that doesn't do well. a great story of a lab with lymphoma, cancer of the lymph nodes, who came to see me, and they had already scheduled the euthanasia appointment because this dog was just so miserable. And they came to see me and said, you know, can you offer a miracle? Can you do anything? And I said, geez, I really don't think so, but you know, you can try. We'll try some CBD and see. I know it's not going to hurt. And sent them away. We started, I think, a Thursday night, and I asked them, you know, to give me a call in the next couple of days and let me know how things went. And I didn't hear from them for a few days, and I called them back the next week and a little bit worried, thinking they had kept their appointment to euthanize the poor dog. And she picked up the phone and started crying because this dog, I get choked up talking about it. This dog's favorite thing to do was to, you know, grab his leash and go to the local park and play ball. And this dog hadn't done it in months. And after starting the first dose of CBD, the dog slept and then woke up in the morning, grabbed his leash, dragged them to the park, and played for the first time in months. And he lived another 6 months after that.
That's a great story.
It's a fabulous story.
That's a great story. Dr. Kramer, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it, and I have a hunch we may continue to check in with you as things progress and we move closer and closer to legalization.
That'd be great.
Thank you very much. That's Dr. Katherine Kramer, again, the Vancouver Animal Wellness Center. Amazing. 5 years ago, just really not involved with it whatsoever, is involved in Chinese medicine and acupuncture and different things. But it was a patient who said, I want to try this on our cat. Its quality of life is at zero virtually. It's on so many pain medications. We might as well put the cat down. And then all of a sudden, you know, the CBDs, and the next thing you know, the cat lives 2 more years, and not just lives 2 more years, but had a nice quality of life for 2 more years, and it was kind of the eureka moment for Dr. Kramer. So our thanks to her for spending some time with us. Oh, you know what? This is the time of the show we usually check in with our book club and see what you should be reading. The book club every Thursday right here on THC Live. Now, last week, was it last week? I think we held up the magazine. It was BC Business, wasn't it? And the front page was all about the marijuana business. And we started going, you know, it's not just us trying to get through the confusion. It's becoming a real big business issue, a big business story. Why? Because there seems to be a lot of money at stake to be made. And you can, we talked also about, or we were going to talk about, and we're going to talk about now, is buying and trading and selling stocks when it comes to cannabis. And you'd be surprised at how many there are out there, and it's not even legal yet. Let's take a look at some of the numbers. And I think it was something like over, was it over 60? It is big business, that's for sure. Yeah, over 61 publicly traded Canadian marijuana stocks. It's not even legal yet. And there are 61 publicly traded Canadian stocks. Cannabis revenues in Canada are estimated to amount to $22 billion annually. 22 billion. 500 tons of cannabis will be produced domestically this year, and it could be higher than that. And again, we are just at the beginning. It is absolutely mind-boggling the way things are going, and you wonder why in Ontario, and we'll talk about this with our next guest, why, you know, it's the Liquor Control Board that's going to handle the distribution of marijuana as opposed to having dispensaries. It is huge business, huge money at stake, and whether it's tax dollars or just the actual revenue generated from sales, we're talking about millions upon millions of dollars. Now, the BC government wanted to hear from you. As they got prepared to handle legalization. What would the rules be here in BC? They had a website put up. They're still gathering information. So far, 20,000 people have taken advantage of the situation of the website and offered their different ideas. I think we have some information on that, do we not? There we go. It covers all kinds of things. Personal possession limits. How much is okay to have? Can I have 5 grams? Can I have 1.5 ounces? What would be legal? Public consumption. Again, even now, if police saw you outside smoking, you know what, if you're not bothering anybody and you're being respectful, they would probably leave you alone. If you start impacting other people's space, there's going to be an issue. Public consumption, what will the rules be? If you've been down to Seattle at all over the last couple of years, you can pretty much walk around. And you see people walking around with the vaporizer pens and different pipes and different things. You can do it almost anywhere. So again, lots of different rules, lots of different things coming into play. If you want to get in touch with the provincial government and share your thoughts, and we encourage you to, as we said, over 20,000 BC residents have done so far. You can check out the website right there. From business to a little bit of a laughter, time to lighten up.
I will describe the effects of marijuana with the help of my assistant. Marijuana is usually inhaled from a kind of cigarette. Marijuana changes behavior by briefly stimulating and then depressing activity. It can also change behavior by creating mild hallucinations. Different people taking marijuana may see different things. Assistant 1 might have this reaction, whereas marijuana might cause Assistant 2 to see this. Some people do not hallucinate. Marijuana may make the same person hallucinate one time and hungry the next. Marijuana creates a psychological dependence. No tolerance is developed.
Kept waiting for Fred and Barney to show up there, or maybe the Great Kazoo. That would explain a lot from those earlier episodes of the Flintstones. We're going to be joined by our next guest in just a moment. Just a reminder, coming up this weekend, it is by-election day in the city of Vancouver. One seat up for grabs on the Vancouver City Council. Our guest a couple of weeks ago was Watermelon Mary Jean Dunstan, who, of course, there you see her. She is running for that seat, giving dispensary owners and cannabis activists a voice on City Council. The timing of it couldn't be more appropriate. The election, of course, goes Saturday, and I'm thinking that she has a pretty good shot, considering I imagine a lot of her supporters are people that wouldn't normally vote. And voter turnout for by-elections is usually extremely low to begin with, so it could be a very close race. If you are interested in having your voice heard at City Council, Watermelon, Mary Jean Dunstan might be your voice, so it all goes on Saturday. As promised, joining me in studio, Deepak Anand is our next guest. And again, just to list off some of the stuff you've done is amazing. I can't do it all.
Right.
I don't know how you find the time. You were the former executive director of the Canadian National Medical Marijuana Association. You submitted a policy paper, and as I said earlier, met extensively with the task force set up to study cannabis legalization for recreational purposes here in Canada. An adjunct professor at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And I love this, teaching Introduction to Professional Management of Medical Marijuana Facilities. Didn't even, again, that's like the first and only recognized course of its kind. Now you're involved in consulting with, again, as we mentioned in our business segment, huge business.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's just go back to the beginning for a second. How did you even get involved in this industry in the first place?
So I've been dealing in pharmaceuticals, 15 years of my life, and when I saw that Health Canada was coming up with what was the MMPR regulations at the time, I thought it was a good point to get into the industry. At that time, I realized that the industry didn't really have a voice, and so I decided to be that voice for the industry and set up an association, an industry association, to lobby on behalf of the industry to government. And that's how I got started, really.
And how long ago was that?
That was 3 years ago.
Okay, and it's amazing. It's only been 3 years, but a lot's happened in 3 years. So, you're involved with the task force. You're offering your thoughts, your opinions on the way things are going. When you hear what's happened in Ontario as we get closer to July 2018 and the supposedly legalization day, Ontario wants to have the Liquor Control Board handle the marijuana distribution.
Right.
Good, bad, what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's going to be a major issue to have a provincial government sort of, regulate everything. I think they're looking at not just regulating where it's going to be sold and how it's going to be sold, but also the online element of it, which is very interesting. I don't know how they're going to be able to enforce those regulations. If, you know, are they going to open every package coming in from outside of Ontario? It's bizarre. It seems bizarre to me. And not to mention the cost. I think that the biggest factor in this is going to be the cost. You know, if you've got a provincial government heavily regulating this, I just think the cost is going to be passed on to the licensed producers, who are going to be required to deliver this to the LCBO at a cheap price, and that's going to be an issue.
Oh, and again, then it becomes to the producers. Is it about just having the companies that are huge, the huge multinationals being the ones that are growing, or is there going to be space for the independent grower? I imagine most of the comments the government hears from folks are, you know, we want to have it as mom and pop as possible. Right. But, you know, the Liquor Control Board is probably the only one that said, hey, you know what, we should be running the show. Yeah. And yet that was the voice that was heard. What are some of the obstacles, you think? And not just with that. I mean, just as we move towards legalization, you know, there was that euphoria at the beginning. Hey, they're going to do it. They're going to make it legal. But as we get closer, it's not exactly that rainbow that everyone thought it was going to be. Yeah,
you know, it's true. I mean, you know, on the flip side, you know, the government did say they were going to legalize cannabis. They were going to eliminate the black market. But they didn't say it was going to happen July 1st, 2018. And I think everyone needs to understand and appreciate that the effort is there, the intent's there. I think eventually we'll be much better off with the system. I think the focus is really on the provinces. And, you know, I think in BC, we're very unique in terms of this market and where it's at, and in comparison to Ontario. So I think it's important that the provincial governments actually get it right, and that's very important.
What makes BC's unique, say different from other parts of the country?
Well, the dispensaries in Vancouver obviously predominantly have existed for a long period of time. The courts have ruled that the dispensaries in Vancouver are providing access, and therefore they remain open. The City of Vancouver has regulated these dispensaries, and I think they've done a good job at regulating, a fairly good job at regulating these dispensaries, given what they can do within their limitations.
It is kind of bizarre that there are dispensaries all over. It's still illegal. It's just a very gray area. When it's gray, it's confusing.
It is, absolutely. It's, you know, you've got the licensed producers on one hand, where, you know, you can buy a product from a licensed producer, have it shipped to you by the mail, but it's a very cumbersome process. There's no touch and feel. You know, while it's a good system on the mail order side, for some, it doesn't really work for the general public at large. And we're seeing those numbers. If you look at where products are going through the ACMPR, it's predominantly in either Ontario or Alberta. And BC is actually very low on the list of provinces that people are ordering this medical cannabis from.
We talked about, you know, I think there was 61 stocks that are already being traded dealing with cannabis, and we're not legal yet. When we mentioned how big of a business this is, and that's why we're seeing this and the major players getting involved, how big of a business can this be?
Oh, it's going to be a massive business. I mean, if you look at those producers and those companies, you know, they're publicly traded, but they are, you know, they're providing a legal service at the moment, and that's medical cannabis. So I think the hype that you're seeing these days now is more towards the recreational market and anticipation of what's going to happen with that. But I mean, not all kinds of numbers have been thrown out. I mean, $1 billion is not out of reach for sure.
You know, it's amazing. You know, I think back to 20 years, let alone dispensaries and stocks. But here you are teaching a course at a legitimate college. It's not, you know, mail in to Bill's Delicatessen and college. It's a legit. It's Kwantlen College. How did that come about, too? Did you approach them about the idea, or how did that come about?
I did. In fact, I realized being in the industry that there wasn't sort of an education option out there, and it was very challenging. You know, KPU, being a publicly funded institution, had a number of reservations around launching a course, particularly on the cannabis side. I remember seeing, you know, the headlines in one of the newspapers saying pot class, and ha ha ha, and very quickly that conversation changed. So being in the industry, I realized that there really wasn't an outlet that provided information and education. So I went to KPU, continuing studies at the time, and said, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And they said, "Well, no, but you know, let's hear it. What have you got? What have you got to pitch?" So I pitched them this course, and you know, we've had 700 students go through the course to date from all over the world. And it's an online course that can be taken anywhere in Canada and the world for that matter.
And what does the course focus on?
It focuses on, so there's 4 main modules. It focuses very much on the regulations and the legal side of growing cannabis, marketing cannabis, as well as complying with the regulations in general.
Well, considering we don't know what the rules are, how hard is that to teach?
Well, so that's the misinformation I think most people have. We've got very stringent regulations by Health Canada called the ACMPR, and there's a number of compliance initiatives within that you actually need to be able to follow. So there's some real good guidance in terms of what needs to be done to grow cannabis for medical purposes.
Now, we were talking before we came on the air. No matter what happens July 2018, most of the guests that we've talked to over the last month or so, it's kind of going with the flow. It's ever changing. Nothing's written in stone. It's going to be evolving. Is that how you see it as well?
Absolutely. I think the Liberal government from day one has said it's going to be a phased-in approach. And I think what they mean by that is they're going to change the regulations. If you look at the way it's written even now, it looks like dried cannabis and cannabis oil is the only thing that will be permissible in July of 2018. Well, looking at the U.S. states, looking at the dispensaries, we know it's going to be edibles. Edibles are huge, so it's going to have to be introduced for this program.
Why wouldn't it be? Like, it seems silly not to. You're doing it already. What is it? It used to be the province newspaper: go big or go home. Like, really, like, why not?
Well, I think the federal government's very concerned that all hell is going to break loose, and it's not. I mean, if you look at the U.S. states, clearly everything's been okay. If you look at the dispensaries, we've got legal product happening today. So we're not really legalizing a drug that's illegal. We're just basically legitimizing that industry and that operation. And I think that's the important thing that people need to keep in mind.
One of my things, before I take a question from a viewer, is I always thought that they should earmark the taxes specifically for something. So those opposed would go, oh, okay, I see what the money's paying for. We're going to use the marijuana tax just to pay for kids' school playgrounds, or whatever it may be. Is that something that you've been involved in the discussions and offering advice? Is that something that could be in the works?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at Oregon, just yesterday they announced that they've spent $85 million in terms of tax revenue generated from cannabis sales towards schooling and education. I think the Liberal government has made it very clear that any money derived from this is going to be put back into education and health awareness campaigns, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it just can't get lost in general revenue. And we say this all the time, this is new money.
Yeah.
This isn't money that okay, so you didn't spend the money here, so you spent it here, and we'll grab. No, this is money that they've never seen before, these tax dollars. That's what makes it exciting, I think, from a government standpoint, not just to go, oh my God, look, more money. What can we do with it? Should be the goal. That's what they should all be thinking. What can we do with it?
Absolutely. No, I agree with you 100%.
Let's take a look. I got, I didn't even have to have the lovely and talented Carmen bring it in. I have it all on my own. The matter, technology is amazing. This from Jeremy. Oh, are there any other schools that provide cannabis industry training? Are there any other courses you're aware of?
So recently, Niagara College just, I think about a couple of weeks ago, launched a program online that, not online, actually in person, where you could go in and take a course, and that takes 2 years to happen. So there are some courses in Canada coming online. KPU is working on a couple of courses. So I think there will be more as we go along.
Here, Zamir asks, where do you think the most job opportunities in the cannabis industry will be?
Well, I think most of the opportunities are going to be on the retail end. I mean, it's kind of unique. We don't know where the provinces are going to go with this, particularly in BC, Alberta. We have some indications. Currently, the jobs are on the growing side with licensed producers. I think if we were to see a retail setting, we'd see a lot more jobs on the retail end. It's
remarkable. Like, did you foresee this? I guess you did. It was 3 years ago. You saw which way it was going. You kind of got involved and said they need a spokesperson, a lobby, I guess, for lack of a better term. How fractured is the industry?
We've got, too many silos, I think.
I would think so,
There's a lot of people working in a lot of different silos. We've got the dispensary movement, which, is doing some great things, but they're operating in their own silos. We've got licensed producers, on the other hand, doing a lot of great things as well. But it is quite fragmented, and I think we need to all get together. And I think, to be quite honest, the legalization conversation and the provinces getting online will eliminate a lot of that. And eventually, it'll be this big industry.
It almost has to be, doesn't it, for it to move to the next step? Too many chefs in the kitchen.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, it spoils the recipe or whatever the saying is.
Absolutely, yeah.
Before I let you go, where do you see us a year from now?
Well, I think that Canada is at the forefront of this. We're the only G7 nation to actually legalize cannabis. I think that we've certainly set up on the world stage Canada to be a leader on the cannabis file. And I see us doing very well on it. The rest of the world are ready. Australia, Jamaica, Colombia, they're all coming online. Germany is importing products from us, as is Australia. So I think on the international side, we're really going to grow. But I think I'm quite proud of us as a nation to legalize this.
It was funny. I thought for the longest time Canada avoided the conversation because we didn't want to anger our neighbors to the south, and yet it was them. Washington State and Oregon and Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
They the ones who did it. And then, we missed the boat. We should have been doing this 15 years ago. The amount of money we would have raised and spent on, hopefully good projects.
Oh, absolutely.
Would have been amazing.
No, 100%.
Deepak, thanks so much for coming in. We appreciate you spending some time with us. Deepak Anand. And as mentioned, your resume is unbelievable. What are you doing right now?
So I'm currently working with a licensed producer called Cannabis, and that's my current position.
But see, that's interesting. So they're a licensed producer.
Yes.
But they're not a distributor.
No, so it's very interesting the way Health Canada has created this program. Is we've got a license to cultivate, but we can't sell yet. So we need to apply for a different license.
That doesn't even make sense. You have a license to open a restaurant, but you can't sell to customers.
Yes, I mean, and
just stockpiling the food.
Yeah, well, that's essentially what we're doing at the moment. But hopefully, with legalization coming online, Health Canada streamlines the process on how we can be able to grow and sell fairly quickly.
Crazy. Again, ever-changing, ever-changing.
Yeah.
Deepak, thank you so much. Hard to believe the time just flies by as we get set to wrap up another edition of THC Live. Just want to give you a heads up for what's coming up on next week's show. Of course, Nikita back from Paris will be back in studio with us. Also, Chris Bennett is going to join us. I just love the fact that he runs an ethno-botanical shop called The Urban Shaman. A name, I'm not even going to, he's an author, he's done lots of other things, but The Urban Shaman. I love the name of the store. He's going to be joining us live. Also, Cheryl Rose and her daughter, Haley. Haley suffers from a form of epilepsy and a few other medical conditions. She was suffering something like 100 seizures a month. 100 seizures a month. Think about more than 3 a day, sometimes when she was sleeping. She started taking cannabis as a form of treatment down to 3 a week. Down to 3 a week. It's amazing. Cheryl Rose and her daughter, Haley, will join us next week on THC Live as well. Until then, have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you back here next Thursday.